So, this is a story where it's just more proof that getting out of an abusive relationship, even if it's just mentally abusive, is sometimes near impossible to do. And it can even be deadly. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Anne Marie Fahey. Viewer discretion is advised. Anne was born on January 27th, 1966 in Wilmington, Delaware. Anne was the youngest of 6 children, born into a family that was basically middle class at the time. You know, they weren't ever like a wealthy family. They weren't really ever like completely poor, but Anne grew up in a household that was troubled. When she was 9 years old, her mother sadly passed away from battling cancer, and it would cause her father to like spiral completely. He became an alcoholic. He hit the bottle really, really hard after his wife died, and through that, he essentially began to neglect his fatherly duties, his husband duties, his everything. He just fell off the wagon completely. It got to a point where he basically stopped paying the bills. Anne would recount times where she would come home and the house was dark, the house was hot, and this was because the electricity bill wasn't being paid. So it got to a point where Anne and her siblings were basically being bounced around from living with friends and relatives, back with their father, and then sort of back with relatives. For Anne, specifically, this was a very rough patch for her, and this really hit her mental health, as I think anyone can understand. It really caused her to spiral as well. She became a person full of insecurities, and especially to do with her weight. It actually got to a point where she was becoming anorexic, and she would even start to abuse like laxatives. In an April 26, 1994 diary entry, she wrote this. She said, "I also feel that my world is so out of control, and the only thing I can control is my food intake." On June 19th, 1994, she wrote this in her diary. "My weight is 129 pounds. I have a serious problem right now, and I am not able to confront it." But despite all of that, Anne was still, get through high school. She went to college. She graduated while still struggling with, issues with anorexia. But she was still doing relatively okay. She would actually go on to get a pretty nice job. She was one of the scheduling secretaries for the then Delaware governor. His name was Tom Carper. Because Anne was now a part of the political circle, she would be introduced to and she would meet many very influential, very powerful people. One of those people would be a man by the name of Thomas Capano. He was a very prolific attorney. He had actually been chief counsel to the previous governor of Delaware. Tom was also a millionaire. He had a wife. He had 4 daughters. He himself was one of 4 sons born to a family or a father who started a very prolific construction company that would make them lots and lots and lots of money. So Tom not only grew up with millions of dollars at his disposal, he then in turn would become someone who would have millions of dollars at his disposal. He was someone who was used to getting exactly what he wanted. He was, let's just say it, he was very entitled. This would create a very egotistical persona, one where he was overly confident in everything. He was also very controlling. of the people in his life. But he was somehow apparently able to mask all of that by coming off as this absolute charmer. He could charm the socks off of you, apparently. So, Anne would meet Thomas sometime in the spring of 1993, I believe. Apparently, according to people in her life, the attraction was instant. Tom had told Anne that his marriage was in the process of ending, that they were going through a divorce. But this was not true at that time. That being said, Anne did know he was a married man still, technically, so she kind of knew she was becoming someone's mistress. She was becoming the other woman. This is not something Anne had ever done before, and her friends would recount that she definitely felt a lot of guilt, but at the same time, she was under the impression that Tom and his wife weren't really together anymore. So she, bought into that lie because, again, he's very convincing at it. At the time, not only was Tom not going through a divorce, he was also already 15 years deep into another affair. Yeah. He had been dating/sleeping with a woman by the name of Deborah McIntyre. And again, he had been doing it for 15 years, and it was still going strong. And to make matters worse, Deborah McIntyre was the ex-wife of Tom's ex-legal partner. So, like, a friend of his, he took his ex-wife. And then on top of that, Deborah McIntyre was really, really, really good friends with Tom's wife. And sprinkled in there were other minor little affairs from here and there, time to time, just for the thrill of it for Tom. Now, his wife didn't know about any of them. Anne didn't know about Deborah. Anne didn't know about the other flings. And why would Anne Fahey get involved in this situation to begin with? Well, Tom offered stability in her otherwise normally unstable life from growing up. He offered her consistency. She had been struggling to find those things for many, 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 many years. So not only that, Tom was a millionaire. Again, she did not grow up with money. She was not used to having lots of money. And now you have this man who is offering lots of money, basically. So this millions of dollars would be very enticing to someone like Anne. He offered her, essentially, a balance in life. According to friends and people who kind of knew about this affair, Tom essentially would leverage Anne's past against her, almost as a way of entrapping her within this affair. And it worked. I mean, he showered her with very expensive, very lavish gifts. He would give her money when she needed it. She had a car issue once that was going to cost her a lot of money. And he was like, here you go, just fix the car. And boom, solution. He would take her to the finest of restaurants. He would buy her the most expensive clothing, bought her expensive purses. She was living the life. Tom wasn't doing all of that for love, for romance. He wanted, one, I'm sure he just wanted, sex with a younger woman. But he was also doing it because he loved to control people. He was obsessed with controlling people, especially women. He was a narcissist. He was a manipulative monster. And women didn't leave Tom. Tom left them. But for Anne, someone who still had a conscience and was aware of the wrongdoings of this type of thing, this isn't what she wanted, ultimately. Anne wasn't an adulteress. She wasn't a homewrecker. She wasn't here to ruin marriages. And after a while, she realized that Tom wasn't leaving his wife. She wanted actual love. She wanted romance. She wanted to be treated like an actual queen. The affair was like this on-again, off-again thing that kind of bounced back and forth for about 2-ish years or so. And it got to a point where Anne she tried to break it off. She wanted to go do her own thing finally, but again, Tom doesn't let that kind of thing happen. He would use her insecurities against her. He would use her health issues, like her mental health, and also her battle with and struggle with anorexia and abusing laxatives and all that. He would use it all against her. And he used her guilt of being in this situation. He used it all like he was putting a knife to her throat and threatening to cut her throat, that kind of thing. He would just sort of beat her down mentally to the point where she felt she had no choice but to, at this point, stay with Tom. But it got to a point where she grew more and more distant from him. He would harass her by sending her emails. He would try calling her all the time. And, she tried to ignore most of it, but that became very difficult. All of that was done to get her to cave in and just sort of go, okay, fine, I'll go back to your loving arms, Tom. Anne would tell her friends, though, that she was becoming afraid of him. She was concerned that he may physically hurt her in some way. But in an April 26, 1995 diary entry, she wrote this. Our relationship is finished. I know it is my problem and my fault. I told him things that were hidden inside of me. She's blaming herself for this entire situation. And that's exactly what Tom wanted. In December of 1995, he bought her plane tickets to Spain. Wow, okay. But she said, no thank you. And this was for one big reason. She had started to date another person. It was a man by the name of Michael Scanlon. And he was everything Tom was not. He was single. He was basically Anne's age. He was the perfect guy for Anne, and the two of them fell in love pretty quickly. For reasons unknown, however, she would continue to interact with and be in Tom's life, probably out of fear. She probably didn't want him to rat out to her new boyfriend or expose to the world that she was this adulteress. But all of that would come to a close. On the night of June 27th, 1996, Tom Capano took Anne out to dinner at a very fine dining restaurant in Philadelphia. Witnesses at that restaurant would state they saw the couple arguing. They both looked very unhappy. They looked like they just didn't want to be there. Anne wasn't eating her food, so Anne had to get a to-go box with her entire meal basically inside. It's believed at this point that this is when Anne told Tom, for good, we are done. I am not going to keep doing this. No matter what you do or say, we're done. I'm tired of being essentially your mental prisoner. Not confirmed, but it's just what's believed. Tom says that night he drove Anne back to her apartment and he last saw her at about 10 p.m. that night. Anne would be reported missing a few days later on June 30th after family and friends could not get a hold of her. When her family was able to get access to her apartment, they noticed something that was very concerning for them. It was subtle, but it was concerning. You see, Anne was known as a clean freak. Everything had its place. She never threw clothing on the ground. She never kept things on the counters. She was just very peculiar about that kind of thing. So when her family walked in, they saw that she had a dress just sort of thrown onto a chair in her bedroom. And this was a dress that she was confirmed to be seen in on the night of June 27th at that restaurant. And then on the counter in her kitchen was the to-go box with her meal in it, with buzzing around with flies. And then next to that was her purse, her wallet, all that good stuff, her keys. All extremely unusual. Anne never let food sit on the counter. She would always put it directly into the fridge. Her family speculated that it looks like someone else had placed these items in her apartment. It just felt off to family. So when police were notified that she was missing, they would find out that Tom Capano was the very last person to see Anne. So they would question him. He would give what sounded to them like rehearsed statements, like he was reading a script in his mind about what happened that night. So they would look further into Tom, especially into like his financials and his bank records, and they noticed something very odd. The very next day after Anne disappeared, basically, Tom purchased a new rug, and he also purchased a very large ice chest. Two very strange purchases. Police also discovered that Tom's other mistress, Deborah, had purchased Tom a gun. This is because, as he said he was feeling unsafe, and so he needed something. But for some reason, instead of like getting it himself, he had Deborah buy him the gun. That's odd. So the police got a warrant to search his home, and in his home, they found what looked like a brand new couch in his living room. It looked brand spanking new. It smelled new. Everything about it was just new. He said he had just bought a new couch. And near the couch, on like the wood floorboards, police found a couple of drops of blood. So they took samples of that blood, tested it. Lo and behold, it belonged to Anne Fahey. On July 4th, 1996, in some nearby waters, two fishermen would find an ice chest floating in the water. The chest was opened. When they looked inside, there was nothing in there. Now, I don't know if police, when they got this chest, if they found any blood blood drops or anything like that in there. I don't know. But what they were able to do was they were able to match this ice chest to the one that Tom Capano had purchased the day after that Anne had disappeared. Now, if Anne was dead, her body has never been found, even to this very day. If she was murdered, a murder weapon has never been found to this very day. But after a very, very lengthy, we're talking over a year, grand jury trial, they would finally indict Thomas Capano for the murder of Anne Fahey, even without a body, even without a weapon. And so he would be arrested with and charged with her murder. His mistress, Deborah, would testify against him, stating everything about the gun. You see, she testified for the prosecution because the defense basically tried to accuse Deborah of killing Anne. Tom's defense said that she accidentally shot and killed Anne Fahey while she was on Tom's couch at his house. And this all happened after a big argument broke out. Deborah found out about this affair, and Anne found out about the affair, and everything was like, crazy. So Deborah, for some reason, had the gun, and something happened, and then she shot Anne and killed her. Which the defense, by doing this, acknowledged that Anne was murdered, and acknowledged that she was shot. So, and Tom was apparently a witness to this, so they are also acknowledging that Tom saw this happen. The entire thing, the prosecution would say, this is why Tom had Deborah buy the gun for him. He was planning to set her up. So if they could trace the purchase of the gun back to her, clearly she killed Anne. This was all just more manipulation by Tom. He was now trying to manipulate the masses, manipulate the media, manipulate the lawyers, the judge, everyone. But his manipulation tactics were done. They were over. It wasn't going to work anymore. But ultimately, it would be Tom's own brother, Gerald, who would seal Tom's fate. Gerald would testify for the defense about essentially what happened the night of June 27th, 1996. So Gerald was called to Tom's house because Tom needed help with something. Well, that something was a body. A body that he would identify as Anne. And he noticed there was a gunshot right through or right behind her by the left ear. And so Tom had purchased the ice chest. So this was basically the next day at this point. He purchased the ice chest, and Tom allegedly had to break Anne's legs to get her to fit inside the ice chest. So Gerald helped, I guess, put her in the chest. But Gerald also had a boat. So Tom was just using him because he had a boat. And so they used the boat to go out somewhere into the Atlantic Ocean, and they dumped this ice chest together into the ocean. But at some point, Anne fell out of it. And her body is unfortunately somewhere in the ocean, but it's never been found, and it likely never will be. Gerald says, then Tom we just destroyed everything. He went and destroyed his couch because, again, she was sitting on the couch when she was shot from what they believe was behind. So Anne likely had no idea this was about to happen. So she likely felt nothing, and she wasn't afraid of anything like that happening because it happened behind her. So he destroyed the couch. He had to burn a rug because it had blood on it. He tried cleaning up as thoroughly as he can, but he missed a few spots of blood. Oh, raspberries. With these incredibly damning witness statements, with circumstantial evidence out the wazoo, and with the little bit of physical evidence they had, they were able to successfully convict Thomas Capano of the murder of Anne Fahey. So he was found guilty, and he was sentenced to death. But after some appeals, his conviction stood, but the death sentence was overturned for reasons I'm not 100% sure. My guess is because they didn't have a body, but I could be wrong. I couldn't see why it got overturned. But he would be resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. On September 19th, 2011, Thomas Capano was found deceased in his jail cell. He had suffered a heart attack due to obesity. Listen, Anne Fahey was not a perfect person. Yes, she had an affair with a married man, but she fell victim to Tom not just in murder, but in manipulation, in a man who used her insecurities against her to keep her. She fell victim to his lies, with his idle threats. She fell victim to his threats to expose her as an adulteress to not only her new boyfriend, but to the world. And ultimately, Anne, she just didn't know how to get out. And this is a case with a lot of abusive domestic violence situations where it's nearly impossible to get out of those situations because they are afraid that they're going to get killed. And ultimately, sometimes in the end, they do. But the same thing can happen with mental abuse. It's essentially the same thing. You know, she was afraid for her life. At one point, she was concerned for her safety. But she also didn't know how to leave. She didn't know how to get away because he used her mental health struggles against her. And to him, I say, good riddance, bitch. That is it, folks, for this case. I hope you found this one interesting. I don't know if you've heard of this one before. But yeah. If you want to see shorter form content from me in 3 minutes or less form, you can head on over to my TikTok account where I have well over 2,000 cases over there. I got about close to 2.8 million followers. Trying to get them to all come over here, people. Yeah. So yeah, go give me a follow over there if you like. If you have a case you would like me to cover, please send me an email to mikey@truecrimerer.com. That is listed below in the description. But first, please go to my link tree, which is also down below. Go to my crimerer case list. Scroll through the list. There's well over 4,000 names on it. If you want to search for a name, if you're on a computer, hit Control F. If you're on a phone, you want to search, hit the three dots at the top, and then hit Find and Replace and search for the name. If it still doesn't come up, then send me an email with the name, where it happened, when it happened, and then I can add it to my list. Please be patient. It takes me a while to get through all the emails. And also be patient. I choose the cases at absolute random. So, yeah, it could be tomorrow or it could be a year from now. So, yeah, patience is a virtue. And finally, if you would like to purchase any merch, like, for example, this shirt that I'm wearing here, see, Making a True Crimerer, woohoo, fun, you can go to our merch store, also in the link tree below. We sell shirts with different sayings. We sell hoodies, we sell mugs, and a wine glass, and other little things. So if you want to support me in any way, you can do so, and we do ship internationally. So yeah, have at it. Okay. But like I said, that is it for this one, folks. Until next time, true crimerers. La 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 la, crimerers. Nope, it's not that time of fuck. Too early for that? Yeah. It's too early for that? Yeah. There's no one there. I don't know. Okay. Oh, there's still no one there. Fa la la Christmas.